So I actually leased my first car, and I took the $262 difference between purchasing and leasing, and I put it into an overfunded cash value policy. And then I bought that car out with the cash value in the 39th month. And I took the payment I would have made for the remainder to make it 60 months total and put the money back into the policy. And then I bought every other car since with cash. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. What's the best way to purchase a car? Should you pay cash? Get a loan? Use a lease? I mean, how much can you even afford? And is now a good time to buy a car? Well, Lord knows they're out there saying, hey, 6 months before you make your first payment, we're going to pretend like you paid the first 2 months. We're going to throw in piñata. We're going to give you, I mean, it's like they're doing a lot. I threw that out there. I mean, even though you don't have, like a sombrero on today, you're more Paris than you are Mexico, but still.
Oh, man.
A lot of them are even like, you don't even have to come to the dealership. We'll come to you with the papers and the car.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
I've never purchased a car like that myself. I'm curious to know, what was your first car that you ever drove?
1975 Chevy Silverado. It was brown, had a little rust going on with it. It was a standard. It was a short bed. I love that truck. I regretted ever selling it, and so then I ended up buying a 1981 Chevy later on that didn't run very well, and it was an automatic transmission. So then I found a 1976 Chevy Cheyenne short bed, orange. It's being repainted right now. I'm gonna put a camper on it. I'm gonna drive around, and I'm gonna drive to the mountains and write like I'm one of the old school, writers, one of the great American authors. Smoke my tobacco pipe while I pontificate. All right, how about that?
Oh, brother.
What was yours?
Well, legally or when I was a kid?
Just the first car that you drove.
Were you talking about on the farm, what you were driving around?
Yeah, I drove cattle trucks, and there was an old Chevy Nova, not the cool ones, the old hatchback ones that were pieces of garbage. And that one was fun because you had to actually start it, put it in drive, and had your foot on the gas simultaneously. You couldn't actually get it to keep running.
You had to jimmy rig it, huh?
Yeah, and then, we would go out to the hay fields after they'd cut the hay, and the straw's super slick, so we get going as fast as we could, and then just crank the wheel and just do donuts all the way down the...
Donuts in the hay field.
I'll tell you the first vehicle I drove. So my dad's a coal miner, and the bosses are in town, and so he has this Bronco that they drive around on the surface, and there was a big company party at Lagoon, which is this theme park and kind of like a Six Flags here in Utah, and they left me home one night while they went up, and then I was coming up the next day to meet up with them. And I decided I would take that for a little joyride, got into a church parking lot, see how fast I could go, turned too quickly, blew out the front tire, got a nail, pounded the nail into it like somehow it got a flat, moving it out of the driveway so we could play basketball, but drove home on the rim. Needless to say, I was in a lot of trouble.
Is this the first time you admitted this?
I threw a party.
Is this going to be public knowledge?
My buddy crashed our three-wheeler into a canal. My other friend grabbed a Sprite and sprayed it all over the house, so it's all over the ceiling. I was an asshole. That's all I could say.
You sound like
you didn't disagree at all right there. You just let that happen.
But when I got my driver's license, it was a 1981 GMC Sierra with no air conditioning, no heat, and missing those triangle windows.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
So it was the biggest piece of garbage. But my dad, he knew what we had done to other vehicles, so he was not going to let us drive anything but the old ranch truck that was just beat to death.
What did you have, Stova?
I had my grandma's hand-me-down. It was a 1984 Sierra Cutlass Oldsmobile.
Cutlass. We used to call the Cutlass a Cutlow.
It had...
Because you're Cutlow when you drive it.
It had power locks, power windows, power seats. The seats were so bouncy that my friends and I had the best dance parties in there as we're driving down 16th Ave in my town.
Look how happy she just got thinking about
it. It was
vehicle.
my favorite car. And then I went to get my own car after that one, bit the dust. And I got a Plymouth Neon. Nothing was automatic. Like I had to roll down the windows. I had to adjust the seat myself. No cruise control. So my first car was actually better than the one that I drove when I was in college.
Oh, feel so bad for you.
Yeah.
All right. So, Tim, let's just talk about this. I mean, the first vehicle that I purchased was a 3.5 Acura RL. Okay. I went, and when I went to the car dealership, they had the last year's models that were still on the lot. And what they were doing is they were creating an incentive that if you would lease from Honda Finance, instead of having a $800 payment for a 5-year loan, the lease was $550. And the residual 39 months later was much higher than the value of previous RLs that would be similar mileage. So I was like, cool. So I actually leased my first car, and I took the $262 difference between purchasing and leasing, and I put it into an overfunded cash value policy. And then I bought that car out with the cash value in the 39th month. And I took the payment I would have made for the remainder to make it 60 months total and put the money back into the policy. And then I bought every other car since with cash. So you don't always find those deals. I remember trying to buy an Escalade truck. Yeah, Escalade truck with 24-inch black rims. Okay. Yeah. I looked at the lease for that. It was ridiculous. It had an effective rate. Like, leases aren't exact because you have residuals and stuff, but the effective rate essentially was telling me it's like getting a 12% loan. Yeah. So that didn't make sense. So it really depends on the situation. I just use simple interest rate calculators, right, to analyze this. So it's the payment, and then the residual would have a balance, like a loan balance, that I would put as a negative, right, and then put the payment, and then it would tell me what the effective rate would, which was about a negative 1.3% by leasing that car versus buying. But right now, interest rates are really, really low. But here's a few warnings I want to give people. I didn't realize this when I was 19, but I figured it out a few years later. When you go buy a vehicle, a lot of times they say, hey, we'll give you $3,500 cash back or 0% financing for 36 months. If you don't take the cash back, then you've paid all of your interest up front by having a higher payment of $3,500 for that purchase price. So it's not 0% interest. It's front loaded at $3,500 of interest. Yeah. So you got to measure these things, and simple interest rate calculators, which I had, which annoyed some of the salespeople, as I'm like, no, that's, so I was going just telling them I'm going to buy it for cash. Yeah. Whether I was planning on it or not.
Yeah. And you can, like he said, you can have a simple interest calculator with you, or you can call your credit union or your bank ahead of time and say, if I got this car, what would my payment be? And then when they give you their 0% loan, but you didn't get the rebate, if it's higher than the credit union or the bank, that means they're charging you more interest than the credit union or the bank would be charging you on the same car.
So when I went to buy my first car, I had the same haircut that I have now. Okay. But instead of gray, I had bleached it, so it had like these blonde streaks in it. Yes, instead of the gray.
I remember
so it was
those
blondish,
years.
Brownish, and I had 2 hoop earrings.
I would have loved to have known you in another life, Gunderson.
Yeah. And so when I went into the first dealership, I was looking at 3 different types of cars, 3 different dealerships. Each one of them checked my credit score before letting me drive the thing, and my credit actually dropped because I looked over a 2-week period of time. So I also don't let them check your credit until you know for certain that you're going to buy it, because those inquiries, which are known as hard inquiries, can actually impact your credit score.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're a business owner, a lease can make sense. It's easier to deduct a lease than it is a payment.
You can write off the entire lease, where there's a cutoff point at which you could depreciate a car that you're owning. So that's another consideration. Good point.
And then the other point to consider too, if you're going to do that, leasing versus buying, and whether the company should buy it or should buy it personally, talk to your insurance agent and figure out the difference between your commercial interest or your commercial insurance versus personal insurance. Because sometimes you might save some on the lease to do it through the business, but then your insurance rate went way up because it's a commercial insurance instead of a personal insurance. So,
and is now a good time. I have some opinion around that.
We haven't even actually read the question. Should we read the question?
I thought we read the question.
We got so carried away talking about our awesome rides when we were teenagers.
I just got excited.
We didn't read the question.
We read it before we hit record, and then I was just going off. So thank you. This is why we have you here, Stolpa, to keep us on track and ask the important questions, like what movie character would you want to play your life, or what vehicle did you drive first?
I'm just here for entertainment, y'all.
Y'all. All right, Yins, let's get going.
Okay. So the person that wrote in today says, I had a question regarding my car lease. The monthly payment is $395.42, and this has a 36-month term. I am now 7 months in. I wanted to ask if the cash flow index would apply to this, and if so, would you recommend, or what would you do? Sorry.
What would you recommend, or what would you do?
What would you recommend I do in this case?
So the cash flow index is difficult here because of the residual value. And also, it's like you have the payment for the 36-month period, but then there's still a payoff. So it's almost like you're looking at it at two loans. You could get your immediate payoff what it is right now. You can go into them and say, hey, I want to end the lease now and just buy this out. But that payment isn't going to reflect what the payment would be if you had normally done that. So it's a little bit hard to do. You can figure it out, but you have to kind of figure out those numbers.
And you're in a lease already, so which isn't bad news. Here's why being in a lease today isn't bad news. In 2019, 7.6 million people were behind on their car payments. Now we're seeing with COVID and everything, dealerships are having a slowdown to the point that car companies are saying 6 months no payment, and we see unemployment rates going up. So your car, now that it's a used car, might be harder to sell for what it was originally worth before this happened. But because it's a lease, you get to walk away once you've used it, once you've made those payments. So I have to make like a correction here. I said I always paid cash. Actually, I once bought a Mercedes, and I won't ever buy another one because a tail light went out for $1,250.
Wow.
I'm good. I don't need one of these. But I leased it for the reason that I didn't know if I'd want it long term, and that I knew I could just walk away after that period of time because I was worried about the car market going down. And if the car market goes down in value, buying might not be a good idea right now. Waiting a little while, I don't think the deals are going away. And don't get so enticed by the payment or the deferral payment. Look at what the actual value of the vehicles are going to be moving forward. And if those vehicles start to lose value overall because of defaults, because so many used cars enter the market, I wouldn't be jumping in right now. If I didn't want or need a new car, now's a good time to kind of hold off.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
All right.
Any other
Thanks, Money
comments?
Nerds.
All right. So look, we answered the question before we even asked it, but I had an intro, so we knew what we were talking about. And thanks for the fascinating question on what we drove first. Now you have the ideas to turn your thoughts into profits and to build a life that you love. Go ahead and ask us questions at AskTheMoneyNerds.com. We'll answer it here on the episode and help you out.